Yeah. So can I see my screen? It is. Yeah. Okay, nice. So let's get started. So in this session I will be walking through all the web evaluation journey where you know where we will be looking at each part of web, what was it before, and what challenges have been faced, and how we have improvised the web. And also in this session you can relate why we are using the top trend technology these days on front end like Angular, React, or maybe a Vue. So I hope you would enjoy the session. And also one thing, like I had tried to put all these technology images, but there is no choice. Like I have missed few things, so I know that. Okay, so let's move ahead. Uh, so before starting, let's get from the beginning of how web works. So I know I will spend only half minute how it works. So basically, on the left hand side you can see a client, and the right hand side you can see a server. So basically, whenever we need to access any website, we enter the its domain address, basically domain name. And basically internally what happens is it connects with the DNS, and DNS sends us back the actual IP address, and that actual IP address will internally send to the actual server which where it is located, and we get the HTML page. And that's how the web works, and we can see the pages on our browser. But then the very start thing is the World Wide Web, which is www. So it has been invented by Tim Berners-Lee in 1989, and I would like to share the little story behind it. So basically, this guy is working for Sun, CARN company, where all the scientists were working together. And the problem what they have is each scientist was working on a different projects. So if someone gets stuck at something, and if they want to ask for help, they have to go actual for coffee and ask the question to the peer person. And this guy want to solve the problem in such a way that everyone will know like who is working on what, and their particular white papers on some network based hub. So he created a document and other resource sharing platform where people can put in their work and their documents, and from that other person can see what exactly it is in. So this solved the problem. So in between that, um, he has invented HTML, which is hypertext markup language, HTTP hypertext transfer protocol, and then URI. So basically each resource will have its own identifier. So that this is what the URI is. And after that, in 1994, the W3C org has been a committee has been founded, and that's what the maintaining the all the web standard. So little bit about myself. I'm working as a senior software engineer over here in Singapore Deskera. I'm also MS MVP GD, and I also have one open source NGX lib, and also I contribute to Stack Overflow. So if you want to follow me, you can follow me on with Pankaj Parkar handle on GitHub, LinkedIn, or anywhere, Twitter. So let's get back to the topic. So this is very initial page that have been went live in 1993. So if you look at this, you will feel like you are reading the newspaper. So this is what the way before, like it's like just putting the text onto the page, and there can be some images which will be zip. So this is how it was looking like, but and we were calling it as a static HTML pages because we don't have this dynamic content at that time. So you can see that this is like vertical layout. You don't have any CSS to apply. Also, you can show images with a GIF format, and that is also supported. And that's it, nothing else. So then I would like to little bit give an overview of HTML journey, how it have been happened. So in HTML1, we have a form, table, and input and button. That's the only thing which we have very basic to show the HTML. But later on, the HTML 2.0 version came in 1995, which included the form-based file upload and tables feature. So basically, table has some keywords in HTML 1.0. So those have been improved in 1995. Until the time there was no JS and CSS. So all the things were static. So this is how it could have been look like at those days, like very vague button. I mean, no CSS and all. Um, so later on in 1996, JavaScript has been invented by Braden Ike, and then after the next year, CSS has been introduced, and these two things have changed the way we have been looking at the web. Basically, JavaScript have been helping us to do a dynamic operations, like dynamic operation in the sense, if you want to manipulate any DOM, highlight a color on the fly, and CSS helps to decorate the page to make it beautiful. And this is the further history of it. In HTML3 has been went into 1996, but for some reason it have been abandoned. So 3.2 came at last in 1997, and those standards have been revised, and then finally 1997 HTML4 came, and that became the official standard. So before this, what people were doing is people were creating their own extensions, and the extensions are very browser specific. Like if you are developing any website, it may work in Internet Explorer, but it might not work in the Navigate Escape or the other browser. So that was the problem. But after that, they have made some standard, and everybody should have followed that standard. So extension things have been went away, and everybody started integrating all the standards as per the whatever mentioned in the W3C official standard. And then after HTML4 you could have make your website look like this, very beautiful, that can have an animation, kind of animation and all. But then we started to think, as soon as the JavaScript came into the picture, we started to think in some way, like, can we make a dynamic HTML pages? So with JavaScript, we can make it. But what about if we want to render a data from the server? So we have languages like PHP, MySQL, or .NET, Java. So what we started doing is we have those HTML pages on the server side itself, and when we ask for some URL, suppose index website abcxyz.com/index. So that time it went to the server and it get the index HTML page, and it rendered the PHP and MySQL thing on the server side itself and send back to the server, and the page gets rendered. Okay. And also there were some few things were happening behind the scenes for dynamic web to make it dynamic. So initially there were common gateway interface that came in 1993, then Perl, then PHP2, and PHP2, then the ASP, Java, those guys come into the picture and they started contributing to the dynamic web. And this way, these things were quite interactive because they were following the SOAP REST standards, and also they were serving the page from the server itself. Uh, and that's where the adoption of web started. So basically the technology leader like Microsoft and all came into the picture, and they have started .NET, Java, PHP, with their respective pages like ASPX, JSP, and applets. And what they did is they gave us a code behind where we will be writing our code, and later on that will be filled up and send it back to the client, whoever asked for it. Okay, and that is how the dynamic web was before. So to give a gist of it, you can see that you can relate this. This is the ASPX page, which is a .NET page, where what we used to do is any .NET variable that I want to bound to the HTML, that can be using some kind of uh, parenthesis, angle bracket start percentage and percentage angle bracket closing. So basically what this will help is this will get the product name from somewhere from the list.aspx.cs, which is code behind. And same thing for JSP page. This also have some kind of wrapper around the variable name, and it helps to evaluate a page value from the a respective Java class. And this is what we call it as a server side rendering. Basically what we used to do in those days, like client ask for hit for some URL, and that went to the server. And what server do is like basically it find the page based on the route. Basically default.aspx or main.aspx is search for that page in the view template, in the views that have been registered. And as soon as it gets the view, it passes that view to the template engine. And if there are any code written behind the scene which is interacting with TP, it fills up the value here, and it creates the final HTML page, and that HTML page sent back to the client, and it gets rendered on the browser. So this is like whenever you need any page, that will go via server. Okay, so that was the server side rendering was. But there are challenges. Okay, what is the challenges? If you want to get a large data set and that you want to render it on the server, it was taking a lot of time, maybe minute or two. And and also you were pushing the logic of data binding on the server side. That also increases the load of the page, and also it affects the initial page load. And each time you click on any page, the page gets re-rendered. That's not good for UX. So what people thought is like, let's try to do something. Let's before having a like this code behind and all, let's try to reformat this. So they have introduced the MV star patterns, and they try to segregate the code. And basically after doing this, they have achieved a little bit of performance gain, so that the code was getting reused, some things were made little bit performant. But this was not significant amount of solution for what the prop challenges we are facing. And before, what we used to have is, if we have a so-called REST client, we have XML way to communicate with the server. Like XML is like this have a nodes. Nodes can have its value or attribute and all. So, but then if you want to do some funky stuff in between, somewhere around 2007, I think, what had happened is you have a something came into the picture, which is the Flash animations, where you will be using Flash plugins to develop the web, and you can embed the video, audio, and on click of each button you can play it, or do some funky animation and all. So that was very good and it was working. But the only challenging thing was with the Flash. The Flash sites were take too long to load on the web browser, because earlier we don't have a very fast speed of the internet, and these sites were very heavy. It almost took like 2-3 minutes to load it. So people were using it at the beginning, but later on they saw that it is not that performant. Also, in between this all, in 1999, XML HTTP request came into the picture, and this particular, in short, this is Ajax. Okay, so what happened is, after XML HTTP request came into the browser, landed into the browser, people changed their way to look at the web. So they started thinking like, yeah, this can help me to load the dynamic content on the page. I don't need to do a server side rendering each time. So I can only refresh a part of a page whenever needed. So basically, Yahoo also, at the same time, Yahoo also offered the web-based service JSON API, and the XML HTTP request code look like something like this. So this is very simple, but some people find it very, not very, but little bit not good to use. So jQuery came into the picture, and they have built the $.ajax wrapper around it, so that the API may look nicer. And that's how where the jQuery got little bit famous, and also they were doing a DOM manipulation in simpler way. And this is what the JSON is. In 2000, around 2000, JSON have been invented by Douglas Crockford, and you will see that JSON is quite little bit lighter weight than the XML, because it don't have a node and attribute and all. You just have to mention the property and its value in object form. So you will be saving few bytes of information while transmitting over the wire. So then people started like, yeah, what we can do right now is, we have Ajax, we have JSON. So can't we do something like, we can separate out the server part and client part altogether? So that what we can do is, the earlier we were facing a challenge of rendering a data onto the server, correct? So server is also taking care of binding on an HTML page. rendering, not rendering, basically the forming of the HTML. So by doing this, by separating both the thing, we can have a separate RESTful API and the separate web page. So by that way, we can achieve some performance gain. And also we can utilize the browser features, like browser caching and all other things. So that's the where the client side rendering came into the picture. So now server will only have actions or methods that will serve a data, and this is the client side rendering architecture. So basically, this is the client, which is a browser, and this is the server. So basically, client have a HTML, JS, and CSS. So initially we ask for index.html that have been served by the uh, server, and thereafter all the things will start happening on the client side itself. So we basically ask for a data whatever we need. Like suppose I want to show the user view, I will ask for user data, and server will process it and will respond to the server data. I will using the XHR and some JavaScript. I will render that data on the JavaScript on the browser. Okay, so that is how we thought about the client side rendering. And this kind of problem are very easy to solve. Like I want to do some validation of username, I can do that using Ajax call. But earlier this was quite hectic to do. So there were a server post back, so we have to handle the each post by using each post back flag and all. So this kind of problem have been solved. But then again we went to the depth and we started thinking, oh, now we are able to do dynamic things on a page, and now we can also separate out each page separately in the HTML form. So we, like suppose this is a website, this has a three HTML pages, uh, home, contact, and about. So home HTML will have its own content, same contact and about. But then you will see that while navigating between the home, contact, and about, what you will see that if you look at this page, the inner content is already is going to be replaced. On click of contact, it will load the contact. On click of about, it will load the about content, and on click of home, it will load the home page content. So don't you think, like, even though we are only loading the middle part, we are loading thorough page and with its JavaScript, CSS, and JS resources. So yeah, we were doing that. So basically, what we can do is we can improvise this. When we land on the home page, yeah, load everything. But when we land on the other contact page, we can replace this part only. So that's where the SPA came into the picture. So how we started thinking is we can just place a placeholder element on our page, which could be making sure that it will be watching in the URL, and based on the URL, it will load the particular template and its JavaScript code inside the DOM. So this is how we can do that. We can configure in such a way that home will load home component, about will load about, and contact will load the contact template. Okay, and this is how the SPA have been thought. Then SPA have few problems. Like whenever your application gets in a bigger state, the initial page load gets very good amount of time. That is not good in terms of UX. And also SEO becomes difficult. The reason behind SEO becomes difficult is about the crawler doesn't understand the JavaScript. So when you give such kind of pages to the crawler to crawl it on your page, so it won't work because JavaScript is disabled on that instance. So basically this is like quite tough to manage with SPA to do the SEO thing. It is manageable right now. I will come to that part afterwards. But yeah, for at that instance that wasn't there. So the solution was, first thing is to improvise the performance. Bundling and minification can be there so that there will be less resources to be loaded in the browser, and because of that there will be less server side round trip. Also we have applied a few compression techniques to um, compress the bundle size. Then lazy loading meaning each bundle can be loaded whenever it required. Like on home page we can only load the home page bundle. On contact page we can only load the contact page resources which are required for a contact. And SEO's problem can be have been solved by hashbang mode that has been introduced by Google in those days. So basically, before your hash URL, there is explanation mark that have been introduced. But after some time, that latter time, it have been removed for some reason because other webmaster were not supporting that. And also in those days only, responsive design, the mobile market has been went up, and people started thinking like one website should work on all the platform. And we started thinking in different way now. Like we want to define a responsive web just by having a single code base. And also we have found that like each device takes a different amount of time to parse the JavaScript. So this is the article. You can go ahead and read that by Eddie Osmani about what are the different device takes how much time to parse the small JavaScript file. And suddenly, what had happened in 2007? Apple announced that they are not going to support Flash at all because of many reasons. Like it is very heavy and all. But then thereafter, people have basically that time also, only Flash have been died, and people started moved out from the Flash, and they started looking for an alternative. And that's where the responsive design have been introduced. And the Twitter and the Zhub Foundation, they have introduced some frameworks which are like CSS framework. You can use those class, and that class will make sure like that CSS rules will make sure that it will work on all the devices or platforms. Okay. And the next problem that we started appearing or maybe started facing in the next days are data binding. What is data binding? Data binding is, if you have a JavaScript variable that is there inside the JavaScript, and you want to use that same variable onto the client side, show it somewhere onto the page, it is data binding. You are binding the model value to the view or the HTML. But if you look at this page, and if you thought about this page to render via using JavaScript, normal JavaScript, or maybe a jQuery, you will see that you have to write a lot of imperative code that will specifically focusing on a DOM and then inserting a text into it. And that isn't nice. So people tried to solve the data binding problem with SPA. And before earlier there were a knockout, backbone, this kind of framework, and they were solving this problem. But things was becoming very what I can say very difficult when it comes to a complex object to bind onto the UI. So then Angular JS came into the picture in 2012, and they had solved that problem elegantly. And the same time the React, Orilla, Mithril, Angular, that came after the some time. And these guys help to solve this problem in much better way. Then we still need a faster page loading time, correct? It is not like we have discussed, like there were problems, we haven't solved them, we have solved them partially but not thoroughly. So what people started thinking is, people went back again to the server side rendering, but now they said that we will use a Node.js. Okay, using Node. So what is it? Like, why Node? Because Node understands JavaScript. It can also help us to render the page onto the server side as well. Okay, or it can form the HTML over there, and it can throw up directly to the browser. Okay. Also, it has Chrome V8 engine, which is there inside of Chrome. Also, we can use the JavaScript on server side to render some kind or do some kind of JavaScript operations. Okay, and also it will help us to solve the SEO problem, because ultimately our JavaScript is going to be rendered on the server, so we are going to give that JavaScript directly to the crawler. So that's the solution to the problem. And again, like there were some situation like you won't find the server side rendering as in more efficient way of doing it. So that's where the isomorphic application came into the picture. And what is the isomorphic application is? The isomorphic application are the application where you will be having both the rendering all together, a server side rendering as well as the client side rendering. So in gist, what you have to remember about this is the initial rendering will happen using server, and the next navigation will happen, will taken care by the client side routing. So this is what the figure is. The first rendering will happen by server, and the next will be happen by the browser, so that the initial page load time will be lesser, and when navigating between the pages, the browser will take care of the front end side, so that will be obviously going to UX will be much better. So to give a gist about whatever we have, we have look at till now. So let me summarize this in a one image. So earlier we have a static pages. Then we went with the server side rendering. Then we saw that yeah, Ajax and JSON is powerful thing. We can develop a dynamic page rendering like on the server side itself and make it little bit better. And then we have came to the point where we need a single page application where thorough page will be on client side rendered. And for solving the some of the issues, we use the bundling and minification. Okay. And after that, what we did is to make it performant further, we have used lazy loading and code splitting to make it much better. And later on, we again came back to the same point where we thought like server side rendering is nothing but our way to go. But in server side rendering, now we are doing that, but with Node. Okay, and we move a little bit further. The server side rendering is powerful, but we have to combine with something else, which is isomorphic app. So first rendering will happen with the server side rendering, and then next consecutive rendering will happen using isomorphic app with the client rendering. So this is called as isomorphic architecture application. Okay, so this was the gist about the what is the current wave. Okay, so moving ahead, where current wave is heading. So this is the interesting part. Um, so before or now we are mostly using HTTP 1.1 standard. So HTTP 2 is the new standard, or it is called as H2. So which has made there were some problem, not problem I can say, but there were some things that were making some kind of um, less performant our web request. So basically, what happens with HTTP 1.1 is when you make a request to the server, it initiate it actually say the server like yeah, I'm going to initiate a connection. So server sends back the acknowledgement, and then that's where the connection gets alive, and then the communication happens. Okay, so this happens for each request. Okay, and that give us some kind of milliseconds thing to make the acknowledgement handshaking thing. But in HTTP2, what will happen is once server and client made a connection, that will be alive throughout throughout the communication. Also, they have introduced a header compression which wasn't possible before, and also you can prioritize your framing layer, and also you can do a server push so that the no need to make another call. So that's what the HTTP2. Also, also the new standard, new thing came into the browser, which is service worker. Service worker is nothing but you can say this can be like help us to take a use of different browser API like navigator API, or if you want to make use of offline caching, you can use the offline caching API. Then but the very the catch you have to keep into the mind when it comes to service worker. Service worker don't have access to the DOM because it kind of runs on separate thread, you can say, but not, but yeah, kinds of runs separately from your browser, so it won't have the access to your DOM. Also, the one more thing is service worker can only work on the HTTPS environment, none other than that. Okay, so that was the service worker, and then using service worker features, we can build a progressive web apps, and this will help. That this will be basically using the offline caching API to load the page very faster from taking it from the cache, and it also helps user to it makes the UX better. Basically, we load it one time and we take the resources from the cache. And also, apart from that, progressive web apps help us to get an access to the navigator API, via which we can access some of the kind of native API from the browser, and which can help us to integrate the payment gateway and this kind of thing. So if you look at the current giant, Forbes, Flipkart, OLX, Pinterest, these are the giant who are using PW at production. The next thing is web component. So web component is a feature, not feature, standard basically, introduced these days only, back in 2012, I believe. So basically, what you can do is with web component, you can define your own custom HTML tag, and that tag can be act as a component, like what we are doing these days with AngularJS, Angular, React, or Vue. So this will be happening, this will be happening by directly, that will be supported inside a browser directly. So this is going to be amazing thing. For now there is a support, but kind of, I think, Safari is not enough to support it. I think Chrome is supporting thoroughly, and there are polyfills always to fill that gap. And also there is one more interesting thing, which is WebAssembly. And what it will do is it will help you to run a binary code onto the browser. Maybe you can use Rust or maybe Pascal to write your code, and you can run that on the browser. So there is a wasm plugin, you can use that for doing it. So why this was introduced? Because you can think like some of the operation can be done on specific languages in in performant manner, but not in the JavaScript. So those things can be done in WebAssembly, and you can run that binary code into the browser directly. So exactly what I can say is about where the current web heading is. You can use SSR plus PWA to make your page UX better. Then you can add HTTP to service worker web components. These are the optional thing, but yeah, you can add most of this, and you can make your project code and very nearer to the current web standard. And also there is a micro front end thing which just came into the picture regarding like management of your code base in very distributed manner, so that remote teams can work seamlessly and the deployments can be seamless. And there are many things which I haven't covered because this is only the 40-minute talks. So yeah, I think, yeah, that's it. um, if you have any questions, you can ask them into the chat and I can answer them.
Hey Pankaj, now I'm showing it.
Yes. So Julius, if anybody asks question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pankaj.
Yeah.
So the question came from Anmol Jain. She's asking, is the route same as the domain name address, which we give in the browser for server-side rendering?
Is the route same as domain name address which we give? So basically this is point of connecting two things together. So let me try to decipher this. uh, yeah, so domain name is like, it helps you to uh, get the initial pages or the make and request to the API. So basically internally what happens is whatever domain name you specify, that gets converted to the some IP address, and we make an request to that IP address. That happens internally by communicating with DNS. So coming to that point where you are asking the route, what is it? The domain name address which we give in the browser for server side rendering. So basically, ultimately, what happens is for server side rendering, whatever there inside the URL, suppose you are making a call using abc.com/home. So what will happen once that request went to the server? It will check what is there inside the URL. So after a domain, we have /home. So the way server processes, it tries to look up inside the registered route with /home with home, and whatever whatever wherever the path matches, it loads that particular controller method and returns the either API response or the HTML page, and that's where it gets loaded on the onto the browser. I hope I have answered your question.
Cool. Thank you so much, Pankaj.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody has any further question, please do feel free to post in the chat, and Pankaj will be more than happy to respond to you in the live chat as well.